Security dragged black CEO off the plane hours. Later, she pulled their $4. 9. B. Lifeline. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Mom, step away from the line. First class isn't for people like you. The words cut across gate B7 like a blade dragged over glass, sharp, cold, deliberate. Heads turned. A ripple of whispers rolled through the terminal. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in a sterile, icy glow. But there, right in the middle of first-class priority boarding, stood a woman in a red dress whose very presence seemed to pull the room into a different gravity. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She simply breathed slow, steady, her phone still in her hand as if the world hadn't tried to shrink her down to a mistake. To her left and right, two airport security officers stepped closer, mirroring each other like the polished pillars of a gate meant to keep people out. Their badges gleamed under the overhead lights, their faces rigid, unreadable. They weren't yelling. They didn't need to. Their posture said everything. "We don't believe you belong here." A few feet behind them stood the woman who had uttered the insult, a blonde airline supervisor, arms crossed so tightly they seemed fused to her chest. Her eyes were thin slits of disdain, scanning the black woman in red as if she were an inconvenience rather than a human being. The supervisor's voice rose again, sharp enough to pierce through the airport's constant mechanical murmur. "I said, step aside. This line is for verified first-class passengers and elite members. You've ignored multiple instructions." She hadn't ignored anything. She had spoken exactly 0 words. Passengers clustered behind the retractable belts, watching the scene unfold like a staged performance they didn't pay for but wouldn't dare miss. Some pretended to check their phones while openly recording. Others exchanged small, poisonous smirks, the kind people make when they think they're witnessing someone being put back in place. Boarding for the flight flickered across the monitors. B7, first class, priority only. A pristine gate wrapped in white glass and polished steel, clean, controlled, hierarchical. But the woman in red, she stood like a fracture through that order. One of the officers stepped forward, hand brushing the radio at his shoulder. "Mom, we've been told you attempted to bypass boarding procedures and refused to comply with instructions." His tone was cool but not neutral. Neutrality doesn't tilt downward. She finally lifted her face to him. No anger, no fear. Just clarity, like the stillness before a storm understands exactly where it intends to break. The supervisor let out a breathy scoff. "Honestly, I don't know why this is even a conversation. People like this always try to slip into first class and act confused when they're caught." The murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "What a scene." Another said, "Some people really don't get boundaries." The woman in red tightened her grip on her phone, not in frustration, but in decision. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Security shifted, preparing to escort her away from the gate. The supervisor stood taller, smugness blooming across her face like a bruise turning purple. "Let's go," she said sharply. "You're holding up paying passengers." For a moment, the world shrank down to a triangle. The two officers, the supervisor, and the woman in red at the center, surrounded by the cold architecture of a place designed to measure worth by status, class, and silent assumptions. Then the woman in red raised her phone to her ear. Her voice, when it came, was soft, controlled, precise, the kind of voice that makes even silence lean in. "Hi, it's me," she said calmly. "Pull everything, all of it. Yes, the full amount." A tiny pause. 4.9 billion. The officer on her right blinked. The supervisor's smirk cracked. Someone in the crowd gasped so loudly they startled themselves. But the woman in red didn't look at any of them. She simply ended the call, lowered her hand, and waited still, dignified, immovable. Like she had always belonged there. Like she owned the floor under their feet. And in a way, she almost did. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The airport's polished floor reflected a tableau frozen in disbelief. Two security officers rigid as statues, a supervisor whose confidence was evaporating by the second, and the woman in red, calm, upright, radiating a quiet authority that felt suddenly, dangerously real. The call she had just made hovered in the air like a detonated secret. The supervisor blinked twice, confused laughter bubbling in her throat. "Nice try," she said, but her voice didn't have the same edge. "You can drop the theatrics, ma'am." Funding? Billions? Really? Her attempt at condescension landed flat. Even the security officers didn't seem convinced anymore. The officer on the left cleared his throat. "Mom, who exactly did you call?" The woman in red didn't turn toward him. She simply slipped her phone into her clutch with the elegance of someone placing a crown onto velvet. "That doesn't concern you," she said quietly. "Not yet." A current rippled through the onlookers. Strangers exchanged glances, curiosity cracking through their assumptions like light punching through storm clouds. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Another murmured, "Who calls billions like that?" The supervisor straightened her blazer, trying to regain control of the narrative, slipping away like sand through clenched fists. "Look, we don't have time for this. I've already submitted a non-compliance report. Security will escort you." Her tablet vibrated, then again, and again. A rapid tremor, like something panicked trying to crawl out of the device. She frowned and glanced down. The screen lit up with alerts, red banners, urgent notifications from headquarters. Urgent. Funding withdrawal detected. Immediate internal review. Triggered priority flag. Executive financial emergency. Her breath hitched. Another alert appeared live on the tablet, bold and blinding. Primary investor has pulled $4. 9. Be effective. Immediately. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like someone had unplugged her from the wall. The officer on the right leaned in. "Is that real?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes snapped toward the woman in red with a dawning horror, the kind that only appears when truth arrives wearing the exact opposite dress of your assumption. Passengers behind the ropes were now recording openly. The scene had flipped. Moments ago they were capturing what they thought was a routine humiliation. Now they were filming a tremor, a shift in the balance of an entire corporation. The woman in red finally looked at the supervisor. Her expression wasn't cruel. It wasn't triumphant. It was something quieter, heavier, a disappointment so controlled it felt like judgment itself. "You should have spoken to me," she said softly. "Not at me." The supervisor swallowed hard. I didn't know who you were." "That," the woman replied, "is the problem." A message tone chimed again on the supervisor's tablet, this time from someone far above her pay grade. "Find her. Stop everything. Now." She looked up. The woman in red was already stepping forward, not toward them, but toward the boarding lane they had tried to keep from her. Security didn't block her this time. They parted instinctively, as if gravity had shifted, and she was now the center they orbited. The supervisor opened her mouth, but only a thin, broken whisper escaped. "Mom? Please, wait." But the woman in red didn't stop. Her heels struck the floor with the steady rhythm of a verdict being written. Gate B7 felt colder, smaller, as if the building itself understood what had just been set in motion. And the airline? It was about to understand it too, one collapsing number at a time. The woman in red didn't rush. She walked with the unhurried precision of someone who had never needed permission to exist. Each step toward the terminal windows echoed like a soft hammer against everything the airline thought it controlled. Behind her, the supervisor was unraveling. Her tablet kept vibrating, alerts blooming across the screen faster than she could blink. The security officers leaned over her shoulders, their disciplined composure dissolving into concern. "Executive channel override detected. Board members request immediate status update. Asset freeze pending." The supervisor's hands trembled. "This can't be happening." "Not over a boarding check. Not over." She didn't finish the sentence. Not because she didn't know how, but because she suddenly understood her own words were no longer safe. Passengers who had been watching from a distance were now stepping forward, whispering, trying to piece together the story as it unfolded in real time. That's her, right? The investor? Did they really lose billions? I thought she was just, guess we all thought wrong. The woman in red paused at the window wall, gazing out at the aircraft connected to Gate B7. Its fuselage gleamed under the morning sun, clean, corporate, unaware that in the span of minutes, its entire financial bloodstream had been severed. Then, someone burst into the scene. A man in a navy suit, tie crooked, breath uneven, ID badge slapping against his chest with each step ran toward the group like a firefighter who had arrived too late. He wasn't security. He wasn't terminal staff. He was higher, regional operations director. And he looked terrified. "Where is she?" he demanded. The supervisor pointed with a shaking hand. He followed her gesture and froze when he saw the woman in red. Recognition washed over him, draining his face of what little color he had left. He knew exactly who she was. He had seen her name on board memos, financial briefings, investor files marked with levels of clearance above his own pay grade. He straightened his tie instinctively, as if tidiness might soften the blow. "Mom!" he called out cautiously, stepping toward her. "Please, just a moment. If we could talk somewhere privately." She turned slightly, her profile calm, carved from patience and authority. "Was the humiliation private?" she asked. The director swallowed hard. "No, ma'am, it wasn't." "Then the conversation won't be either." For a moment the terminal held its breath. Even the ambient hum of the airport seemed to lower itself, like the building understood that dignity was the loudest voice now. The director shifted uncomfortably. "Headquarters is requesting your immediate presence on a secured line. They're extremely concerned. I imagine they are." His gaze flicked nervously toward the supervisor. "I assure you, this behavior is not representative of our airline. If you give us a chance to do what?" Her tone wasn't sharp, just impossibly steady. "Undo what's already been done. Rewrite what your team chose to see." The director flinched, not from volume, but from truth. Behind him, the supervisor looked like she was shrinking into her blazer. For the first time since this began, she stepped closer, no longer defiant, no longer smug. "Mom," she whispered, voice cracking like thin glass. "I didn't know. If I'd known who you were, I would have." The woman in red faced her fully now. "Treat me differently?" The supervisor's mouth opened, then closed. "Dignity," the woman continued, "isn't conditional on recognition. You don't earn it by knowing someone's title." Her words passed through the terminal like a current, quiet, unarguable, and devastating. The director exhaled shakily. "Mom, the board wants to request respectfully that you reconsider the withdrawal." She didn't look at him. Her eyes remained on the plane, the sky beyond it, the horizon stretching wide and indifferent. "The consequences aren't mine to reconsider," she said. "They're yours to understand." A final alert chimed on the supervisor's tablet. "Trading halt activated, airline stock suspended." The woman in red turned away from the window, and that was when the terminal finally realized she wasn't the disruption. She was the reckoning walking in heels. The trading halt alert barely had time to fade before the terminal erupted into a strange, uneasy quiet, not silence quiet. The kind that vibrates beneath the skin, the kind that tells you a storm isn't coming, it's already here. The director stood rigid, his breath shallow, eyes flicking between the woman in red and the supervisor whose world had begun collapsing in microscopic pieces. The security officers shifted their weight, unsure whether to stand down or apologize or simply disappear. But the woman in red didn't look at any of them. She walked toward an empty row of seats by the window, heels striking the floor with an authority that didn't need volume. She sat, crossed her legs, folded her hands over her knee, composed, deliberate. It was the posture of someone who could wait, because waiting was power too. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then again. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. The director reached her first, voice tight with panic, restrained only by corporate politeness. "Mom, the board is asking, requesting if you would please join a secured conference call immediately." She didn't move. "They may speak." The director blinked. "Here? You mean, in the terminal?" She met his eyes. "I wasn't offered privacy before." He swallowed. Of course. A staff member rushed over with trembling hands, offering a portable console, noise-canceling headset, and a privacy partition that unfolded like a shield. The director placed the devices on the seat beside her with the reverence of someone delivering a sacred artifact. The woman in red finally picked up her phone. A single tap connected her to a meeting that, at that exact moment, had every executive in the airline's upper floors sweating through tailored suits. "Miss Rivera," a voice crackled through the chairman himself, "we're hoping this is all a misunderstanding." Her gaze stayed fixed on the aircraft outside, its metal skin gleaming like a mirror that refused to lie. "It wasn't," she said. The chairman's breath caught. A faint shuffle of papers, the whisper of someone hastily muting themselves, panic-dressed as protocol. "Surely," he continued, "there must be a resolution that doesn't involve the complete withdrawal of $4.9 billion in capital." She tapped one finger against her knee, a small, soft sound. "I believe," she said, "that dignity is part of the cost of doing business. Your officers tried to take that cost from passengers who didn't owe it. Miss Rivera, this was a frontline incident, a miscommunication." She turned her head slightly, just enough for the director and the trembling supervisor to hear the frost beneath her words. "Miscommunication ends when people listen. Your team didn't." The chairman's voice grew thin. "We will discipline those involved. That's not enough." The director's posture sagged. The supervisor clutched her tablet like a life raft with holes. Even a few passengers nearby stiffened, sensing sentences that could topple the fate of thousands. "What do you propose?" the chairman asked, strained. In the glass reflection, the woman in red saw the two officers, the supervisor, the director, the passengers leaning in, without meaning to, the entire constellation of assumptions orbiting her. And she said, "A full restructuring of your passenger conduct protocols. Mandatory anti-bias training across every unit. Transparency reports. And an apology not to me, but to the countless others whose names never made your news feeds." The call went silent. Too silent. It wasn't a pause. It was a reckoning calculating its own cost. Finally, "We can comply," the chairman murmured. The director exhaled as if someone had cut ropes from his lungs. One more buzz hit her phone. A message flashed on the screen her team. "Markets reacting. Airline in freefall. Your directive triggered systemic review. Authority remains yours." She locked the screen, stood, and the moment she rose, the room rose with her, or rather, stumbled, startled, unsure how to handle the weight of someone who had never needed permission to stand tall. Her eyes drifted toward Gate B7, where humiliation had begun, where accountability was now learning how to walk. She stepped forward, not slowly, not quickly, just inevitably, because from this point on, the airline wouldn't just remember her name. They'd remember the aftermath of forgetting her dignity. Gate B7 had never held so many eyes, not during delays, not during storms, not even during the holiday chaos that bent the terminal into knots. But now, right now, it was a stage, and every witness felt the weight of standing too close to a story that was no longer just a scene, it was an event. The woman in red moved back toward the gate area, her presence drawing in every stray thought like gravity tightening its pull. Not dramatic, not loud, but the kind of presence that made even the intercom fall silent before announcing another departure. The director hurried alongside her, breath shallow. The supervisor trailed behind, every step small, her confidence stripped to its bare, trembling bones. The two officers followed, but their posture had transformed. They no longer flanked her as enforcers. They shadowed her like guards, unsure who they were protecting her from, the world or the consequences she had unleashed. At Gate B7, a crowd formed a subtle arc around her, not blocking, not suffocating, but giving her the kind of space usually reserved for royalty. Or something even rarer, respect earned in real time. A notification tone pinged in the supervisor's tablet. She winced before even looking. Internal stop order. All outbound flights under emergency review. Stand by for directive from Rivera Capital. Her eyes widened. "Mom, they halted operations for your approval?" The woman in red didn't answer. The question didn't deserve an answer. Not yet. Across the terminal, A group of passengers began murmuring voices, weighted with awe, guilt, confusion, and the slow, crunching sound of realization. She really pulled the money? 4.9 billion? Over how they treated her? No, because they thought they could. Someone else whispered, I recorded everything. Should I delete it? A stranger beside him replied, No, let the world see what they did. At that moment, a different kind of energy began moving through the terminal. Not panic, not curiosity, but accountability, rising like heat from concrete. The director cleared his throat, struggling to steady his voice. Miss Rivera, the board is preparing a public statement. They're asking if you would review the language. She paused, turned, looked at him with an expression that was neither cruelty nor mercy, just truth. Your statement shouldn't be written for me, she said. Write it for the people who can't make a phone call that shakes your stock price. The director nodded, shame folding his shoulders. The supervisor finally stepped forward, voice trembling. Mom, I made assumptions that... She raised one hand, gently, like a conductor quieting a restless orchestra. This isn't about your assumptions, she said. It's about the system that taught you they were acceptable. The supervisor's chin quivered. I'm sorry. There was no forgiveness yet, only acknowledgement. The woman in red shifted her attention to the aircraft outside. It waited, engines off, umbilicals attached, a sleeping giant unaware of the war waged in its name. The director swallowed hard. If you would like us to prepare a private suite, we can. No, she said softly. My experience began here. It ends here. The officers subtly straightened, as if adjusting themselves to fit the gravity of her choice. A new message arrived on her phone. Rivera Capital Legal. Regulators aware. Airline requesting emergency negotiations. All actions remain under your directive. She locked the phone again. Her gaze lifted not to the plane, not to the people recording her, but to the departure board above gate B7. Rows of flights flickered in amber and white. Business routes, economy routes, first-class routes. All of them governed by invisible hands, subtle biases, silent hierarchies. And today, she had exposed the entire scaffolding. The director inhaled slowly. What would you like to do now, Miss Rivera? She stepped closer to the boarding lane, the same lane she had been dragged away from not long ago, the place where everything had cracked open. Her fingers brushed the velvet rope. I'd like, she said, to see who this airline becomes when no one is watching. Her words sank into the terminal like a verdict, not shouted, not forced, just inevitable. And for the first time all morning, Gate B7 stood perfectly still, a place where humiliation had tried to take root, and justice began learning how to breathe. The airport intercom chimed overhead, its chirpy tone painfully out of place. Attention passengers. Flight 382 to San Francisco is experiencing a brief delay. A brief delay? The airline's entire spine had snapped, and the system was still trying to stand. The woman in red remained at gate B7, the center of a widening silence. Not empty silence, pressurized silence, the kind you feel in your ribs before turbulence hits. The director hovered near her, phone pressed tight to his ear, nodding at a voice too frantic to be coherent. His suit looked sharper earlier, now it seemed to be wearing him. Sweat gathered at his collar. Yes, sir. She's still here. Yes, at the gate. No, we can't move her. I understand. But, pause. His eyes flicked toward her. Yes, I'll ask. He lowered the phone, stepped closer with the careful posture of someone approaching an altar. Miss Rivera, the board requests a face-to-face meeting. They're ready to fly an executive jet here immediately. Within the hour. She didn't turn. Her gaze stayed on the aircraft outside the window, its silver hull gleaming beneath the sun, the same plane she had been forcibly kept from boarding. No, she said. The director inhaled shakily. Mom, may I ask why? Because power always moves fast when consequences arrive, she said, voice steady. But it never shows up early enough to prevent them. Behind them, the supervisor stood with her hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. She looked smaller now, not just humbled, but haunted by a truth she couldn't unsee. Watching someone's dignity collapse under your own orders changes something in the spine. It takes a piece you can't grow back, Passengers continued to gather in quiet clusters, some recording, some whispering, some lowering their phones slowly, guilt creeping in like a draft beneath a closed door. A mother with a stroller approached timidly. "Mom, I just wanted to say I saw everything, and am sorry they treated you like that." The woman in red offered a small nod. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't dismissal. It was recognition, quiet, minimal, enough. Just then, the supervisor's tablet vibrated again with a tone different from before, lower, heavier. She glanced down and nearly dropped the device. New directive. Effective immediately, all frontline protocol failures will be reviewed by Rivera Capital Compliance. Full cooperation required. Non-compliance equals termination. Her breath caught. They're giving you operational authority? No, the woman in red said. They're giving themselves a chance to survive. The director rubbed his forehead as if he could massage the chaos out of the air. Miss Rivera, headquarters wants to know what needs to happen for the funding withdrawal to be reconsidered. For the first time, she faced him fully. And whatever he saw in her eyes, resolve, restraint, disappointment carved down to its purest form, made him straighten his posture instantly. "Tell them," she said, "they don't negotiate with the fallout. They negotiate with the cause." He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." A new cluster of employees approached gate agents, a senior supervisor from terminal security, even a woman with an operations badge and a trembling radio. Their steps were hesitant, almost reverent. One of them, an older agent with tired eyes, shifted forward. "I've worked here 27 years, she said softly. "I've seen things brushed aside, covered up, laughed off. Today, you made them look." The woman in red didn't move, but the air around her tightened just a fraction. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Hold them accountable tomorrow, too." The director's phone lit up again, this time with a headline so fresh it hadn't even hit news feeds yet. He showed her the screen. Breaking. Major airline faces crisis after $4. 9. B withdrawal from Rivera Capital. Her expression didn't change. Of course, it had begun. Truth spreads fast when billions are bleeding. The director exhaled shakily. "Miss Rivera, the board is requesting your terms." She stepped back toward the gate lane, the one where humiliation had tried to script her place. She touched the velvet rope gently. "My terms," she said quietly, "begin where your respect ended." And Gate B7 felt it the moment a corporation understood it was no longer negotiating with a passenger, but with the consequence of its own blindness. News doesn't travel in straight lines. It leaks, it spills, it mutates, jumping from device to device, like static electricity desperate for ground. By the time the woman in red released the velvet rope and stepped back into the center of Gate B7, the terminal had already begun humming with something new. Not gossip, not curiosity, recognition. Phones vibrated in pockets and palms. Airline staff glanced down at screens, faces whitening. The ripple expanded outward, Gate B2, B5, B9, until whispers rose into the air like heat shimmering off asphalt. "Is this the woman pulling the billions? They dragged her? Wait, she's the investor? Oh my God, the airline's stock just tanked. Someone said Congress already called regulators. No way, seriously?" "Yes, right now." The director looked physically ill. He wiped his forehead with a trembling hand, staring at the real-time financial data exploding across his phone. A red cascade descending arrows, dropping percentages, markets reacting with the brutal honesty only numbers can deliver. The supervisor's tablet chimed again. "Crisis, brief 2, external oversight initiated. Federal review triggered, media inbound." Her shoulders collapsed so completely it seemed her blazer might slide off. The woman in red stood still, posture composed, gaze steady, an island of calm in the maelstrom she hadn't created but had simply stopped sheltering them from. Two teenagers approached timidly, phones half raised. "Mom," one whispered, "we saw the video, the part where they grabbed your arm." "It's already everywhere." She didn't look surprised. She didn't look pleased either. "Video shows what people choose to record," she said. "Experience shows what they choose to ignore." The teens lowered their phones with newfound shame. Across the concourse, uniformed supervisors hurried toward Gate B7, badges flashing, expressions tight with urgency. They weren't running to control the situation anymore, they were running to acknowledge it. The head of terminal security arrived first, a woman with a crisp posture and eyes that had seen decades of airport chaos. But nothing like this. She approached with measured steps. "Miss Rivera," she said quietly, "I'm here to offer a formal apology on behalf of the entire terminal." The woman in red turned slightly. "Apology accepted," she said, but not concluded. The security chief nodded. She understood. This wasn't about 3 employees. It wasn't even about one airline. It was the architecture itself. A sudden burst of static broke overhead, then a familiar sound, the intercom's polite chime. But it wasn't announcing a delay. "Attention all passengers," the speaker crackled. "We apologize for the disruption across Terminal B. We thank you for your patience as we respond to an operational situation. We are committed to your safety, comfort, and respect." A strange word for an airport announcement. A necessary one. The director flinched. The board released that script, but they didn't approve that last word. "Good," she said. Maybe for once, the system learned something on its own. Behind her, a wave of new people arrived, corporate aides, PR strategists, legal staff, descending upon Gate B7 like a crisis response unit, dressed in suits and lanyards. They weren't here to control her. They were here because the airline had realized it no longer controlled anything. "We have a press room ready," one PR executive whispered. "The media is outside the building. They want a statement." The woman in red didn't move. "I'm not the story," she said. "Your behavior is—" The director flinched again. The PR executive nearly choked on their breath. A flight attendant approached quietly, a woman with kind eyes, trembling slightly. "I wasn't here when it happened," she whispered. "But I saw the footage. I want you to know, not all of us treat passengers like that. Some of us fight to keep this place human." The woman in red studied her for a moment, then nodded once respectfully, sincerely. For the first time, someone other than her spoke with authority. "I believe her," a passenger said. "Yeah," another agreed. "She looks like someone who actually cares." A spark, small, gentle, began to shift the energy of the crowd. And that was when the supervisor stepped forward again. Voice barely a whisper, hands shaking. "I want to resign," she said, looking down. "What I did today, there's no excuse." The director's eyes widened. "A resignation isn't necessary. At this moment we can wait until—" "No," the woman in red said. The supervisor lifted her gaze, startled. "You don't resign to escape accountability," she said softly. "You stay, you learn. You change the system from the position that allowed you to harm in the first place." The supervisor's breath shattered. Tears slipped down silently. Passengers watched, transfixed not by drama, but by dignity reshaping itself in front of them. Somewhere behind the crowd, a child's voice asked his mother, "Mom, is she a hero?" His mother looked at the woman in red for a long moment. "No," she whispered, "she's justice." The woman in red didn't acknowledge it, but the air around her did. And Gate B7, once a stage for humiliation, had now become a courtroom where truth was written without a gavel. Gate B7 felt like a chamber holding its breath. Executives huddled at the edge of the crowd, whispering into phones, eyes darting between stock alerts and the woman in red, as if waiting for a verdict they already feared. Every screen in the terminal flickered not with departure updates, but with breaking news banners that glowed like warnings carved in flame. The woman in red stood still. Her silence had weight now, so much weight that even the hum of the moving walkway seemed to slow down as it passed behind her. The director approached again, voice low, reverent. "Miss Rivera, headquarters has agreed to your full conditions. All of them. They also request that you oversee the new passenger protection protocols personally." She kept her eyes on the runway, long stretches of concrete, burning under the morning sun, planes rolling past like steel testimonies of systems built on hierarchy. "That depends," she said quietly. "Are they trying to fix the problem, or just the optics?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. She finally turned to him, gaze sharp enough to slice through every excuse forming in his throat. "Tell your board this isn't about money anymore," she said. "It's about the cost of forgetting people." The director nodded, too shaken to speak. Nearby, the supervisor, still pale, shoulders trembling, stepped closer. "Mom," she whispered, "I'll follow whatever guidance you give. I want to be better." For the first time all day, the woman in red offered something almost gentle. "Then begin by treating every passenger," she said, "as if they could reshape your entire world, because one already had." And at gate B7, the realization settled over everyone like a closing verdict. They hadn't just mishandled a traveler. They had mishandled a woman who refused to shrink, a woman who carried consequences the way others carried boarding passes. When she finally turned to leave, no one blocked her path. Not security, not supervisors, not executives scrambling to patch the holes in a sinking ship. They stepped back instinctively, creating a clear corridor through the terminal, as if the building itself understood it owed her space, owed her breath, owed her the dignity they had tried to take. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor, each step a quiet signature of authority. Passengers watched in reverent silence. Some lowered their heads, some pressed a hand to their chest. Some simply stared, absorbing the lesson, settling like dust in sunlight. At the glass doors, she paused. Not to look back, she never needed to, but to let the truth settle. Power wasn't the phone call. Power wasn't the billions pulled. Power was the refusal to shrink when the world tried to make her small. Outside, her car rolled up, doors opening with a soft hydraulic sigh. She stepped inside without hurry, without triumph, only clarity. As the car pulled away, the terminal behind her stood changed, not because she destroyed anything, but because she reminded them what dignity costs when people forget its value, and Gate B7 would never forget again.